when I'll watch the replay on Facebook and Twitch. I'm sure they're both going live now. It always picks up mid conversation because like Twitch is way slow for the stream to actually start. Hey, podcast live show. What's going on? I'm Randy,
Melanie,
and I'm Jesse.
And tonight we're doing something different. I'm super excited and a little bit nervous. We've got a guest. We've got a guest here. And I had to William, hold on. I know I just asked you. This is how it goes. We'll do it live. A Dickstein, right?
Boom, killed it.
William Dickstein, author, comic creator. How are you doing, William?
Doing great. How are you guys doing?
Good. Do you prefer William or Will?
Yeah, Will's good.
Okay. Hey, Savannah, what's going on? Hey, Paul. Sorry, the usuals. No previously on Grawlix tonight. What's the deal?
It's a holiday weekend. They wanted to take it off. I don't blame them.
Yeah, I shouldn't encourage that behavior.
Shouldn't encourage that behavior.
All right.
You mean fans?
Yeah, they get so annoying. Freaking fans. I'm just kidding. I love you guys.
Okay, so the format of this is going to be interesting. Okay, so here's what's going to happen. It's not going to be quite your usual Grawlix Nights show because we're going to talk to William. William makes awesome stuff, and so I definitely want to talk to him and find out more about his work and the books that he creates. And then we'll just see how it goes. Might have a discussion depending how long it goes. Maybe we'll hit entertainment news. Maybe we won't. If we do, I do have a couple of interesting stories lined up. Okay. So, William, first off, tell us a little bit about yourself and you're a writer. Do you identify primarily as just like a novelist, like kind of a traditional author?
Yeah, I think the author label is the one that I would really stick on myself. I think it's the most accurate. I don't draw any of the comics, and I don't really make any of the covers for anything either. Right. So I'm just the prose.
Okay, yeah. So let's talk about shows. And I did try to do some research on you, and most of the stuff that comes up is all related to your books. Although I do want to ask you about a YouTube trailer that had to do with Chosen.
Oh,
yeah, from a few years ago. It was well made. It was interesting. I'll have to ask you about that here shortly.
Randy's good at the research. He often surprises the guests.
I'm impressed. Yeah, I'm really impressed.
Deep dives.
Wait, it's a Google. It's Google.
But your Google foo is
awesome. It's great.
Yeah.
It's not as good as it used to be. Google changes things. I feel like the search results are real dumbed down these days.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. First, I'm sorry. I will occasionally just get derailed by the comments.
We got Eddie in the chats tonight, so
Eddie,
that'll happen.
I'm so confused. Okay.
Kiss from a prose. So that's a Seal reference.
Oh,
You're gonna get a little crazy,
Oh, goodness.
All right. So I'm sorry, William.
That's okay.
By the way,
in
case you didn't know what you were signing up for, welcome to Grawlix Nights.
Eddie's a fun machine. I'm impressed.
Oh yeah. He's on it.
Go ahead.
First off, tell us a little bit about Chosen, because that's the big thing. In looking you up, and in the information you sent me, you've written, it looks like several books. Last week you released a comic book. Now, is this the first comic book in the series, or was there another previously?
This is the 9th comic.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I did light research. Just like
Yeah. I have 8 other comic books across 2 volumes for one character named Grizz, and then I switched to a one-shot format because really what I've written are mostly novellas, and I think the one-shot format in general just kind of fits the universe better and what I'm doing. And so this new one-shot that came out last week, like you said, is Chosen Chris, and it is 50 pages.
Awesome. Okay, so tell us about the universe, Chosen Universe, because it seems like pretty much all of your published work that I could find is all tied into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the premise is that we have mapped out a gene we realize destines people for greatness. So you may be strap in, Will. You're in for a pun-filled ride. Cool. Okay. So you're destined for greatness. You might be CEO of a Fortune 500 company, or you may get superpowers. And the wording there is very specific. And I do it so that I have the ability to give you characters who maybe don't really have any discernible superpowers, but save somebody's life at the end of their story. And then we go all the way and turn it up to 11 with people who can literally manipulate matter at the molecular level.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept, and
it made me think of Longshot, the X-Men Longshot. It's like if because his mutant power was like luck based or whatever.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's like that, but it could be a superpower. You could get lucky and get a superpower. You could just be lucky, or you could be lucky and be a rock star. You could be lucky and So it's kind of cool.
Well, some people's gene is so strong that they're and the classifications in the universe only operate really on like the government funded superhero side. Normal people don't really classify themselves. Anyway, so some people, might be a specian where they're sort of like a saber-tooth or a wolverine, but their gene is so strong that they're more animal than person. So they get lucky in that their chosen gene gives them sort of a superpower, but then unlucky because they look like a crab.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so you said it debuted in 2013. What was the first? There's a book. It seemed like episode 1 came out in 2014.
So Amazon, what happened was episode 1 received an update sometime in 2014, whatever the date is on there. And when you make a hard update like I did, and hard update is when you push the update to everyone's Kindle who's downloaded it, which Amazon doesn't do without you really berating them about it. And so it was originally published October 2013, and then I had to sort of push an update to it sometime 2014. So that date's not super accurate.
Gotcha. I need to maybe for interviews, I need to just cover up the chat section so I don't derail myself.
I'm looking at it as well.
So one thing I was, by the way, chat, keep going.
Keep it up.
Fine. Keep with the puns, man. Keep with the puns. If we didn't want this, we wouldn't have done it live.
Exactly.
So one thing that's really interesting that I noticed on the Amazon listing for Chosen Chris was it says that the universe, it's not sequential, it's non-sequential, the series of books as a whole. So you can read pretty much whatever order you want.
That was
almost like an anthology type of thing where you just pull one and boom, you've got.
Right. Well, my question, because from what you were saying, it sounded to me like, is each book or comic or whatever, is it about one character basically? They don't intermingle?
So yes, that is correct. And the longer answer is this. What I did was so we have 3 separate anthologies of novellas right now, outside of the stuff that's for kids. And so the first 5 tell sort of an overarching story while following 5 different characters, right? And so what you get is the unique first-person perspective of the character in the story. All the characters are unreliable narrators. So you get overarching stories that the characters sort of help tell to you. And then you also get meta stories, whereas the reader, as you read everything across the universe and you see characters that were also in that scene, but the previous character who talked about it didn't know about that character being there, you get more details, right? So you also get meta stories in that way where you as the reader get to figure out what the objective truth really is about a lot of stuff that happens.
Right.
So when it comes down to reading them in any order, If you want to read them in the order that I released them in, that's totally fine. If you want to jump around, because one of the anthologies is origin stories of the characters that appeared in the first 5 but weren't the main character in any story. As an example, episode 1 follows Frank. He's a 20-something pizza delivery boy. His mom is the world's most renowned supervillain, right? So her origin story is the first origin story in the Origins anthology, Megatech. You can read episode 1, go right to Megatech, not lose anything across either of them. You can read Megatech first if you want, and then go to episode 1 and still not lose anything. They tell completely different stories, but they are loosely related.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so yeah, you can literally follow characters if you want. Chris is a really great example, because if you start with her comic, when you get to the end, you get to read her original origin story, which I put in a newsletter that I used to run like 5 years ago. And
right, okay,
and then and then at the end of that, I show you which novellas that she's also in, and so you can just follow Chris if you want. You can read the comic, and then you can jump to episode 3, and she's in there, and you can jump to Jane, and she's in there, right? So you can really do this any way that you want to.
Okay, is this something that you've had mapped out, or just that you slowly start adding more to?
It would make me sound really cool if I was like, yeah, I always had this super great overarching vision, but I didn't.
Yeah, one of the conspiracy rooms with the threads everywhere. Everything's been plotted out for years.
You know, they showed like the little cards that J.K. Rowling did when she was like designing Harry Potter and that universe and stuff, and I'm completely the opposite. I am solidly in the middle of someone who plans out what I'm going to write and then writes by the seat of my pants kind of thing. And so when it came to world building, I was like world building a novella at a time. And somewhere around the end of the Origins anthology, when I wanted to actually sit down and do novellas that just outline some of the factions, I realized like, oh wow, I sort of accidentally made a legitimately dystopian setting. And it was because I just kept asking myself these questions that sounded cool. And every time I answered it, I was like, well, it only really makes sense if it happens this way. And then you get a world government and you get, you know, just totalitarianism, and it's just like disgusting. And I don't know, it just happened.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got a world where genetic extremists actually trademark the name genetic extremist.
Yeah. Yeah.
We were talking about that a little bit before we brought you on. So what we're talking about is in his recent comic that just released. One thing that amused me, and it felt like very much kind of a throwback to, not a throwback, but it's very much a comic book thing to do, to where characters are talking about these other characters, and one character refers to them as extremists, and another character is like extremists, and the other chick's like, yeah, genetic extremists, and it's in a special font, and it's got the trademark logo, and I'm like,
yeah.
Such a comic book thing to do. It's such a DC Marvel thing to do.
Yeah.
So it felt like a fun throwback, but also like, is that trademark for real?
Oh,
yeah. So it is purely the meta. It is purely the meta joke. I love that more. That's so good.
I do it a couple times, and the biggest one that's been called out since the book came out was the spinach can on the back of her neck. That tattoo, right? Just for everyone listening, the book is about a girl with magical tattoos. When she touches the tattoo on her body, she gets some kind of magical superpower, right? And so she's got a spinach can on the back of her neck. When you touch it, she goes all Popeye and she gets like super muscular. And so that was like a real throwback, but everyone really liked it, which was cool.
That got I think that got an actual laugh out of me, which is given, and no spoilers, so I'm not going to talk about what happens in it, but like given where the story goes immediately after, I was like, it's man, you make them laugh and then you step on them. But she's like, touch the spinach can on my neck, and I don't know if I'd noticed if the can was there in the art previously, but I hadn't noticed it, and you know I hear it, the Popeye song going.
Yeah. I appreciate you saying that. It was a laughter moment followed by a sad moment. I think that's the only thing I really get prideful about is the ability to make people feel stuff while we're talking about it.
Manipulate people.
Yeah.
No, as a storyteller though, like that's like if you can actually, if you bum people out or you make them laugh, you're getting a genuine reaction from somebody. Yeah. So yeah, I get it. Yeah. Awesome. I had to like poke fun, make my joke, and then immediately backpedal. So you mentioned children's books, and that was something in the info that you'd sent over to me that I found interesting. You want to talk a little bit about that? Because what the comic we read I wouldn't say it's like, it's definitely not like a hard R or anything like that. It was
Right.
I'd say kind of, there's some violence, but I'd say kind of not tame, but it's definitely like mature. It's
PG-13.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I can see that. Yeah.
But you also mentioned children's books. So
Right.
how does that
So
fit in?
yeah, the PG-13 rating, if we go all the way back to when, I first started doing Comic-Cons and stuff, when you have to sell something in person, you kind of gravitate to stuff like that. Parents walk up with their kids and they're like, "Can I give this to my kid?" And so the PG-13 thing was so accurate because I used to say that. And around the time that I first started dating my now wife, I was also, I do a couple shows here locally, and one that I really love to do, which was canceled, obviously, coming up anyway, is the Downtown Book Festival that we have here in Las Vegas. And I love it because it's local, and it just really feels like one of those shows that gets you sort of enmeshed in the like local consciousness here. Every year that I go back, there's more and more people at that show, even more than the local Comic-Con that I do, where there's people recognize me kind of thing. And it's probably because it's like a free event. And so people who go to it with their kids, they go every year. But the big part of it is that there's a lot of kids. It's not primarily a kid event at all, but the kids section, like we're all outside, and the kids section's like inside. It's prestigious. Like if you have kids stuff, you want to be inside. That's where everyone goes. So the first year that my wife came with me, she was like, "Man, you got to write some stuff for kids." Like there's, it was like every third person who walked up to the table, they had kids with them. And if they're, younger than like 13, which they all were, I didn't really have anything for them. So she gave me a little nudge, and I just kind of mapped out the same sort of, I wanted to do some novellas for kids, and they're not really novellas. They end up kind of just being children's chapter books. So I have one out right now that is about, the theme is that your body changes and it's okay, but it follows a little boy who has an elephant trunk for a nose, and he wakes up one day to realize he's growing tusks. So he's got all kinds of other social problems that he deals with. It's a new school. They're making fun of him. He fights robots, which is really fun. And so what I've done after that is I have a second one written and it's ready to go, but we're doing the release thing for the new comic right now. So I'm going to put, we're going to do that after we do this kind of thing. And it follows his bully, which is a little rhino boy. And he's like the established character at the school. And so I'm doing something that I did with the Factions anthology, which went over really well, where I'm following 3 different characters across the same 3 days. Like not even loosely connected events. It's literally the exact same timeline, but you get to see why they were behaving that way. And so the reason that I'm really enjoying the kids stuff right now is because what we really get to see in this little rhino boy story is the way that miscommunication from your parents and the pressure that they put on you as a child, how it can morph you into being a bully. Right. And so that's what his story is about. And, really the only, I only have a couple test readers, and the main one is my older brother. And it's because he's like brutally honest, right? Normally that doesn't work for people, but it works for us. And when he read this one, his big comment was like, "Man, I can't believe you made me sympathize with literally the villain from the first one, who is just like so over the top." But then, I wrote this one in such a way that you kind of realize like, yeah, I could see that happening, I guess, So or that was the intention. Anyway, so yeah, I do kid stuff.
That's great. And you know what? I always say, if you listen back to our stuff, you always go for kids and kid stuff because that's where all the money is. Those little fuckers will buy anything. Not knowing you, but and their parents will just pump some money in it. So that's a smart move on your part. I think that you should stick to that. I mean, do it all, of course, but you'll make a lot of money if you get into kid stuff.
Yeah, thanks.
I like that you're taking your approach, your kind of interconnected world style, and applying it to the kids' books too, because then like I think the kids they'll key into that. They'll respect that because it's not like you're talking down to them in any way.
Yeah.
A lot of times like children's books, people feel like they have to really make the message super simple. No, kids are really smart.
Yeah.
Hey, Paul and Savannah, if you want to get your kids into some extended universes. No? Okay. Are we
Right.
And there's the delay.
Yeah, there's always, of course, there's the delay. And
Yeah.
also, I will have, now, this isn't super helpful for the live stream listeners right now, but I will have links to William's stuff when the podcast episode comes out. So after Monday, if you're listening to this in audio form, check the episode description or go to our website and we'll have links for you.
Yeah.
What else? What other element did I want to ask about? Okay, so how about this? Because that's the question, is what other element? There are a lot of things going on. It seems like a lot of different elements, and I found, I'm going to keep referring to the comic because I just read that, so that's my main frame of reference for your work right now. Something I found super interesting is, so obviously the world has this kind of overarching genetic, as you talked about, superhero, maybe possibly premise or framing device or something. But then, for example, what we see more in Chosen Chris is these tattoos that grant her powers, and there are other people that covet those tattoos to an extreme, which were very cool characters. I did like those characters.
Thank you.
Cool visual too. I mean, like,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and it seemed like maybe that was kind of connected to the gene thing, but also a little bit its own thing. So, I guess, how do you go about pulling these different elements together, and where do you kind of, is it a matter of, I'm not sure how to frame the actual question. I just found it interesting, the pulling these different elements together, and I'm so like slightly bewildered by how this tattoo thing works in the first place, because she has a very strange line about, or maybe it's the guys, the extremists that have it, about how there's only so much ink to go around.
Correct.
And so I don't know. Do you just want to talk about maybe the tattoo concept, but also just the idea, just how you pull in those different elements? Like you said, when you started, it wasn't necessarily even like a dystopian type world, and then it just slowly kind of came together that way when you added different elements that you wanted to incorporate.
Yes. So I'm going to talk in reverse to what you to the way that you talked about.
I feel like I already did. So yes, that's appropriate.
Okay. So let's talk about the opening page that says "Welcome to the World of Chosen," where it tells you about who the capes are and genetic extremists and freelancers and stuff like that. So that opening page, which is something conceptually that I stole from the Forgotten Realms comics, by the way. Yeah. And okay, so what does it do? It frames the universe for you. But what it also does is it lies to you. What it's actually telling you is what the majority of people know about this dystopian world that they live in. And the first thing that we know about pretty much every dystopia ever is that information is highly controlled. So what I'm doing out the gate is lying to you as the reader by putting you in the same frame of mind as the narrators, which are all unreliable, right? So in reality, there's no hard and fast rule, and I say in reality, but in the reality of the Chosen universe, there's no hard and fast rule that really anything is actually linked to the CH05EN gene. So what's happening, right? What's happening is I put the narrators in a box without putting myself, the creator, in a box, right? I'm doing the Brandon Sanderson thing where I'm establishing rules for the magic that's in the universe, but they're not hard and fast at all. And so I have other works, right? We're still going backwards now to the way that you introduced the topic. I have other works out that did some stuff with magic. And if we go backwards chronologically, there is a magical dagger that is in the comics, the Grizz comics, excuse me, and also in the Ripsaw novella. And none of the people who interact with the dagger immediately know that it's magical, outside of like one scene in the Grizz comic. And then before that too, in episode 4, there is a magical lantern, and it like traps souls and stuff like that. And so what I've always kind of done is given these little, sometimes overt clues that magic exists in the chosen universe, right? But the issue primarily is that the majority of the narrators so far have not really interacted with it or know anything about it. And a big thing that I did in the novel, the first full-length novel that came out last October, was I really let people know that information is always flowing down from on top, from the world government, and it's always being modified. The main character in the novel that came out last October is Ivy, and she is a burgeoning superhero, right? She's finishing up at the academy, and as she's getting ready to go out into the world, she has a knack for like really enjoying reading old reports, especially of the senior capes at the academy. And so the guy who runs the academy, his name is Hunter. He's the main character in episode 2. He comes to her in one scene in the book, and he sees that she's reading his old reports. And the second he picks it up, he's immediately scanning the page, and he realizes that like a ton of stuff is missing. And it's stuff that is immediately relevant to her backstory and her life. And so he's like, oh, you know what? Give me a minute. I'll go get you the actual copy of this. And so that's his like sly way of introducing to the reader through dialogue or whatever, exposition, that information is always, always, always being controlled and edited. And so even these characters in previous novellas or wherever who have interacted with these magical artifacts or magical items, when they write that report and they send it on up, it's going to get modified. So, you know what I mean? So the information is always being controlled. So talking about the magical tattoos. So we'll talk about.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I did throw a lot into that.
Boom. Okay. So I wanted to do a couple things. The first thing I wanted to do was dive into Chris as a character. And I knew I had to do it at a time that was previous to her current status in the novellas and stuff like that. So that's why we're reading this, not origin story, but it's just sort of like a prequel to everything that she has going on in any of the novellas or the actual prose. And I wanted to do it because I knew that the concept of having sort of like these magical tattoos and the ink that is the magical ink that powers the tattoos and stuff like that, I knew it would have to be just a whole subculture. She could not be the only one, right? And because we don't have, the materials that go into magical tattoos like they would in, Dungeons and Dragons or something like that, and because it was just this magical ink, I knew that if there was a subculture, there would be people who were going to be preying on it. And that's how we kind of got to the Skinners and stuff like that, people who don't hear the call of the ink, right? The ink is magical. It magically calls to people who, for some reason, are attuned with it. And so they become these, wandering samurai or whatever who go search out this magical ink to get it tattooed on their body. Magical tattoo shops, as you learn in Jane, I think, they're slowly dwindling away, and there's almost no ink left and whatever. But because she hears it so clearly, which is really, really rare, she's able to kind of constantly be one of the only people who is finding more and more of it. So her being targeted by Skinners, especially at that point in her life, was like really dangerous because, she's not enmeshed into the aggregate like she is in her as an adult.
So I don't know if it's just because so I'd not knowing her larger story, this kind of contained story felt, it felt like, it felt like an addiction story, really. I mean, it seemed maybe not so subtly an addiction story about this kind of a homeless wandering character. So yeah, I mean, was that kind of something maybe that inspired at least this installment?
So sort of yes and no. I think anytime I'm looking for a motivation for a character, that I probably accidentally have a tendency to sort of go towards, addiction or stuff like that, right. Power hungry or whatever. And it's not on purpose, but it does happen. So it is one of only 2 works that we have in the Chosen universe that are driven specifically by addiction. And I felt comfortable letting Chris's story take that sort of form because she's gonna, she has the only comic. And then, it is, wait for it, Capes. That's the one in the Factions anthology. And the main character is, I used to call him Meke, but my wife calls him Meek, which works way better. And he is addicted to being punched in the face.
Okay.
That's great.
Yeah, he's addicted to being punched in the face. He has like this static that is literally painful, and it's like a way to, describe the physical addiction that he has to being punched in the face. And if he goes too long without getting in some kind of physical altercation, he's literally in pain.
Oh.
Huh.
Yeah. So
How many? So watching you kind of, and man, 3 into it, and I'd be forgetting which is which. But watching you to kind of like take a second to be like, okay, which story was that? How many books or how many works are out currently in your universe here, and how hard is it to keep them straight in your mind?
I'll show you how I answer this question. I go, there's 5 in the first one. It's the first anthology. Then there's 3 in the next one. So that's 8. And then there's another 3 in the Factions anthology, which is 11. And then there is a novel and 1 chapter book for kids. So technically like 12 short works, 1 novel. Keeping the volumes of the comics together is very easy. There's 4 in each of those. There's 2 volumes. So 8 comics plus 1 is 9. So that's everything. Keeping it straight. Yeah, it's not like hard, because if I just take that second, the information is there because I made it. And sometimes the hard thing is I accidentally remember the first version of something that I wrote.
Oh,
And
right.
so,
Okay.
and so
Like a draft.
yeah. Yes. So someone will talk about a scene and they'll be like, man, I really love the way that, XXX happened. And then I have to be like, oh yeah, I changed it to that. That was a good call. You're totally right. I'll remember if it's something totally different. Ripsaw is a really good example because I actually went back and deleted like 8,000 or 9,000 words. I had gotten it well past the midpoint and then really hated what I was doing. So deleted a bunch of it. And the stuff I had deleted was like stuff that I had meant to tie into other things. And so people will talk about like one scene and then I'll think like, oh, but I didn't put that other scene in Ripsaw. It gets weird. It does get weird. You're totally right, but it's not that hard.
Yeah.
Also, this might be a good time to talk about the trailer.
Yes.
Cool. Okay.
So what this is, at least I'm gonna hand it over to you, of course, because you know what this is. But yeah, like I said, I come across a YouTube channel. I think there's like 3, maybe 4 videos on there, not too recent, but one of the videos, at least, from like 4 or 5 years ago, was a trailer for basically for the Chosen universe, but it's a legit live action. And it looked like nice production value trailer. So what's that about? Is that just like a promo thing?
Okay, here's what happened. From the beginning of Chosen, I knew I wanted to go expanded universe. That was like the only portion of the vision that was really clear from the very beginning. And it sort of ties into like the 5-year plan that I had originally that didn't work out. But what did work out, obviously, was expanding it into these different formats. So the original comic book, while we're talking about this, was Brass Man. And it's an issue 0 that I did with a good friend of mine. And we were never able to really get that going. And that's how I ended up switching over to commissioning things from people. So anyway, originally we had episode 1. And then in the beginning of episode 1, we see Brass Man, who is killed right away. That's what kicks off episode 1. And so the idea was I was going to give Brass Man his own comic that was going to lead up to him dying, right? And then I wanted just a video, like a real world video element. And so the idea was, get a trailer made and then see if it gets any interest, kind of thing. Or if it doesn't, even if it doesn't, I would always have sort of this blanket piece of marketing material that I could show to people and maybe just get them to be like, oh, what is this? And want to then go check out my stuff. So here's what happened. I worked with House of Dawn, who are a local production studio. Really great, super, super great. I would recommend them to anyone, literally. And then I got this really great trailer. And then it sort of worked out for me online, but really didn't. And then what really happened was I was taking it to these conventions with me. Like originally I wasn't even getting a table, I was getting a booth. And so I had this big booth set up with like all these big, banners and stuff. And then I had in the middle of my table, I brought a TV, and I would just like play the trailer and then like concept art and stuff like that on a big loop that would just loop the whole time. So here's what happened. People would walk up because they saw the trailer and they'd be like, "Oh, is this a movie?" And I'd be like, "No, it's books and comics." And then they would leave. So what we ended up with was this really nice looking piece of marketing material that did nothing to actually help, which is really unfortunate.
Right.
But so here's something that did happen that not a lot of people know. So I'll tell you this really quick story. So I released the trailer and I pushed it everywhere. I did a thunderclap when those were still a thing, and it was successful. And I put it all over Reddit and just like everywhere that I could think of at the time. This is 6 years ago now. I put it, and it actually did get some interest. So I had an actual real, like, I don't even know what to call them, a real movie studio who have done stuff that people have seen since they talked to me about it. They contacted me and we had a bunch of calls and stuff. And they basically were like, "Hey, we've got some first look rights with like Universal, and we want to bring this concept to them. And like, is that okay? Do you want to work with us?" And I mean, at the time, I'm like 24. I was like, yes, like, yeah, let's do it. I don't care. And it was this like 3 months drawn out thing where we had all these conversations, and then they had their big day to go pitch, whatever ideas and stuff like that. And they didn't want it, and it never happened. But so it was really cool. All that money that I spent on the trailer ultimately was worth it just because it was like fun to have people see it and whatever. And if you go to the YouTube channel, one thing you also will see is a 14-second clip. I forgot this is on there of I used to have really bad reflux. So you can see the live x-ray of me swallowing the liquid and then watching it shoot back up my esophagus, which is really cool.
That's right. That's the most recent video on there.
Yeah. Yeah. I had them take that because I knew it would be cool. It was the second time I did it. And it was like this whole process. I actually have magnets now that act as a newly installed esophageal valve, so I no longer have reflux.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Medical miracles.
Yeah.
I think it just stole your what we should be amazed about.
Right. Yeah. Oh man, I hate to segue away from that. The comic. Let's talk about that for a second. More specifically, like working on a comic. So you said this was the ninth one you've done. Have you? And you also mentioned that you commission out the artwork on them now after that first one. How do you find the process of working on a comic and working with an artist? How does that usually go? And are there certain artists that you work with repeatedly, or do you usually find somebody different for each book? Or
okay, so when it comes to each new title being a different character, the intention was always to have different artwork for each of the characters. So for the Grizz comics, the artist that we went with, and this was just sort of a coincidence that worked out really well. Grizz, again, he's a Specian, and so he's somewhere in between man and like animal. He's like, I don't know, saber-tooth tiger or something. And so his art style is not like sharp. Everything is not blurry, but you can definitely tell that he's not someone whose eyes are the main way that he sees the world, kind of thing. Which is really, so it was like, I ended up going with some artists who I knew could get it done quickly. And it just happened to work out that their art style sort of perfectly matched him as a character. So every Grizz comic, I was going to use them. And it was these two very nice gentlemen out in Poland, Lucas and Camille. They have a whole studio and they're literally machines. I gave them 4 issues and they got all 4 issues completely done in like 2 or 3 months. It was insane. They were doing legitimately, they were doing 5 pages a week. It was crazy. And so then when it was time to get Chris sort of off the ground, I put out like a request for proposal pretty much for what I'm doing. I just put it out all over again. And, had a whole new stable of people who were ready to go. And so, yeah, every comic is going to have, if it has a different main character, it'll have a different artist for sure.
Mm-hmm. Is it difficult, do you think, to get people to, or that to find people that can visually represent what it is you are saying in words? You know what I mean? I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. And the answer is somewhere in between yes and no. And I'll tell you why, obviously. So when you give someone a script for a comic book, I have discovered it's not unlike giving them a script for a screenplay. And the role that I take on as the person doing, everything except for making the art happen, the role that I take on is director and producer, pretty much. Mm-hmm. And so when I'm writing the script, well, I guess I'm also like the screenwriter or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, when you're looking for someone whose artwork is going to match the vision, there's things to take into consideration beyond just the way that their art looks in their portfolio, right? You really should go with somebody who already has sequential art, right, who's already done the style of comic that you're looking to do. That's all really easy stuff. And so the hard part comes in kind of with what you're really digging into, which is when they actually have the script in their hands and they send you these penciled pages, is it hard to find someone who can read what you wrote and produce something that you think is going to actually portray what you were trying to go for? Mm-hmm. So here's what we do now. And I say we because my wife is super involved in the process also, which makes everything even better, right? Mm-hmm. Here's what we do now is for every new project, no matter what, we do a round of test pages. Everyone gets paid for them, right? No one draws anything for free. I'll do it at whatever rate that they have to take. I don't care. But, we pick the top kind of 4 or 5 people who show interest and say that they're available for the predicted timeline and for the total budget and all that stuff. And I give them the first 2 or 3 pages, like, here, please draw these. They get paid for them. And then literally we just look at those first 2 or 3 pages and we say, okay, based on what I wrote, how does it look? And so we do that whole process. And it's just become like really, really important, especially from the standpoint of getting the comic finished. And so we learned this really late in the game. What happened with Chris was, Ray Larson came in, she drew and lettered and did everything. She did everything in the comic. And then we got a finished product and the colors just weren't really right. And the onus falls 100% on me, right? I had plenty of opportunity to tell her, hey, I don't really like the way this is colored, but I was in the middle of approving artwork when I was doing the release for the new novel that came out last October. So I was really only focused on that. Totally my fault. And so sometime in January or February, when I thought I was still going to be getting ready for the big convention here in town, which was last month, but didn't happen because of Corona, I'm freaking out, right? Because it just doesn't look, I'm just like, I can't do this, And so what I ended up doing was kind of tapping into some resources that I have because I've been in it for a minute and know people. And what I did was a whole second round of test pages just for colorists. And I'm not even lying. I mean, just beyond the difference between, the great stuff that Ray gave us and what we got from Edgar Tavides, the difference between Edgar and even just the other colorists is just so immense. You know what I mean? And any of those colorists who are literally just people who really only do colors, right, any of them would have given us an amazing book. But if I hadn't done this process of having people color the first couple pages, I mean, like, the difference between Edgar and everyone else is that everyone else gave us a really nice looking book and Edgar literally makes the tattoos magical.
Right. Okay.
I don't know how he did it, but even just that the second page or whatever, where you see the butterfly on the guy, I mean, that looks like a real magical butterfly tattoo. It just, the guy blows you away. And so that really is what it comes down to, is not just having the budget overall for the comic if you're going to commission it, but having the budget beyond that to have people do test pages for you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like a paid audition. That's a really smart move. I mean,
yeah, it really is. And it's just so important, man. It's crazy how important it is. And so what we're going to start doing with every new one shot that comes out is, because I'm just one guy and I have a day job and comics cost a lot of money. I've had to go with people who can sort of jack of all trades it and do everything. And what you end up with is very real, justified criticism of smaller aspects of these comics that in the comic book world are really big deals. Like people get really passionate, I'll say, about lettering. Right?
Mhm.
Yep.
Not all lettering is equal. And when you go with someone who isn't a professional letterer, I don't know. When you go with letterer, yeah. When you go with someone whose primary thing is not just literally drawing the words, you end up with font. And there's people who have a legitimate issue with font, and it's totally justified. And so now in the future with these one shots, I mean, the budget's just going to be what it is, and we're going to get people who, they get one job. And their one job is probably just going to be whatever they're really, really good at. And so the books are just going to get better as a result. But it does. It ends up being really, really important. More important than you can anticipate when you're sort of cutting your teeth as you go, which is what we did.
Right.
Mhm.
Savannah asks, and okay, so context for this. So Savannah, for a comic book podcast, we don't talk about comics a whole lot anymore. It's been a few months since we really dove into comics. But Savannah does not come from the comic book fandom side of our listenership. But she said, "Wait, there are colorists. This is a thing. We should really search out a colorist and maybe an inker and a letterer sometime in the future and explore that more, because it's the difference a colorist or a letterer can make.
When a letterer also
pretty incredible.
Oftentimes they have a lot to do with like how the speech bubbles work too, like where they go, like how much of the actual art gets covered up, that kind of thing. And there's a lot to consider there.
There's a lot. And when you're doing comics, there's a lot anyway. It just in general, they can lead the eye. They lead your eye,
right.
Through the story. So yeah, there's several different people working on each panel usually, and in like a DC or a Marvel or something like that.
Yeah, like a larger budget.
Right.
Comic.
So yes, to answer your question, Savannah, you go and you apply to be a colorer, and you color anything you want, and you'll be great.
When there's actually like flat colors, and then there's actually like rendered colors too.
Yes. Like, doesn't somebody even do shading on like separately?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, it's crazy. It gets crazy up in here.
We have a guy, Vic Moya, who is local in Las Vegas, and his line work is it's got to be top 5 in probably this region of the country. Like, he's so good, and just his ability to make the lines beautiful as an inker or whatever the term is. Excuse me. It takes a comic 100% to the next level. It's insane. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Matt G says, "What? You don't talk about comics?" Matt knows. Matt,
we talk about comics. It's just that we have to like read them all first, and we've been busy.
Right. We used to. That's why we stuck with the live streams, because I don't want to that the regular Grawlix podcast show. That's still very comics focused. We just haven't done one of those episodes in a while.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
Oh, sorry. Was there anybody else want to jump in with something?
No, I just wanted to say, Savannah, it's because we're simpatico. I didn't know exactly what she wanted. She wants to go color things.
Yeah, I know. I was just thinking that. I was like, oh, she wants to color. Okay. Well, the other thing is, do you want to talk a little bit about maybe your, like, how'd you get into writing, and maybe your just, if not inspirations for chosen specifically, but like, yeah, how'd you get into writing? What kind of brought you to that?
Okay, so I'm a little kid, and just gravitated towards writing in general. As when I was young, and always had it, somewhere in the background as like a hobby or like a passion kind of thing. the way that people sit there and draw, I would sit there and write, that kind of stuff. I got real serious, like real serious about it when I was somewhere around 19. And, you know, when you, like, the internet really just exploded somewhere around, I don't know, 2004, 2005. I just think that there was like a real hard expansion. And so sometime after that, I was 19. And, you know, when you start to look into these subcultures that you want to ingratiate yourself into and, you know, get used to the terms that people use and the cyclical things that exist within them. One of them for authors is NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month.
Oh, yeah.
And it gives you a very real, tangible way to sit down every single day, write X amount of words, and get to 50,000 to make a novel. So somewhere around 19, I was introduced to this concept and, you know, didn't like being in college. I hate going to school and didn't like the jobs I was working and just needed some kind of outlet for like all these negative things I was feeling, I guess. And so jumped into NaNoWriMo, wrote this like really terrible book. And something happens for people. And you know who has a really great quote about it, I think, is Ira Glass, where he talks about how when you're a purveyor of good art and you sit down to make something that is good art, you'll look at it, especially in the beginning, and you'll realize it's not even close to the stuff that you enjoy. But that's okay, because it takes time to build up those skills, right?
Mhm.
And
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
I think you froze on us. But you guys are still here.
so that really happened.
Oh,
when I-
okay. Hold on.
Hey, I'm back.
You're back.
Okay.
Okay, so that really happened to me, where I wrote this book when I was 19, and I looked at it and I said, this thing is terrible. And so I knew I had to figure out a way to accelerate the process of getting better as an author. And so what I thought to do was go to shorter works, right? It's just easier to have a concise, well put together story when there's less overall scenes, first of all, so there's less to do and write about. And then also, two, I think the short story format or the novella format is very forgiving when it comes to endings. When you have a novel, you need at least one of the threads to be put together. But for almost any good short story, it doesn't really have to have an ending. Like that's not like a hard and fast rule for short stories. I apologize for the dogs barking in the background.
No worries.
So, okay. So wrote a novel, really bad, switched to short stories, still not great, but I was able to do them much faster. And then somewhere in between 19 and 21, I stumbled on a writing group that was tied directly into the online videos that Brandon Sanderson, I think, still puts out or used to put out. He used to have like an online writing workshop that you could just follow along to the videos and get together with whoever you wanted to separately. And it was like you followed the videos, you wrote stuff, you shared it with each other, and then you critiqued each other, right? Mm-hmm. So when I joined that writing group, I had been toying around with an idea, which was like the founding idea of the Chosen Universe, just having a gene that destined you for greatness kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of planned out like a loose storyline about some 20-something pizza delivery driver. And I was in this writing group. And so weekly, we shared 1,000 words with each other. So something happened to the writing group. The first thing, I guess two things happened. The first thing was I got really great feedback from complete strangers, which was like really emboldening, right? Because I had been sort of toiling away privately and not really sharing any work with anybody. And then complete strangers were like reading my stuff and giving me all kinds of compliments, which was really cool. At the same time, I was sharing the writing with one particular friend of mine. And this one guy, which was not, 4 or 5 people, was giving me almost exactly the same in terms of quality and literally the things he was pointing out, the same feedback as these people in this writing group. So I bowed out of the writing group because I wanted to finish the story much faster than we were going to finish it in the writing group, and only shared it with a buddy of mine who was like one of the original founding test readers of the Chosen Universe. And got really great feedback from him on episode 1. And so that's how it got finished so quickly. And also how we got into this self-publishing thing. And in 2013, self-publishing on Amazon was so new. I mean, it was like new. And so it was like kind of this new hotness vibe, and it was like really cool. And it was very easy to do something that not a lot of people were doing and get a lot of attention. So episode 1 from the very beginning was getting thousands of downloads a month, which was amazing. And it was even more amazing because at the time there was no superhero category on Kindle. That didn't happen until like way later. So that's kind of how we got into it. Was being real serious about writing and actively trying to get better, and didn't have any kind of real structure for the output. So the writing group gave me this structure for the output that turned into just this self-publishing process. And then for the first 5, it was like every 9 weeks I was releasing another one, which sort of helped build the platform and stuff like that. And then after that episode 5, I took a step back and I said, okay, we're doing something here. So somewhere around then, when I was getting ready to sort of jump to a new anthology, which became the Origins anthology, I decided to go a little bit longer format. And so all the origin stories are almost double the length of the first 5 novellas. And then in between that anthology and the Factions anthology, I did a bunch of other stuff. Like I was catching work freelance and ghost wrote a few novels and stuff like that. And after doing that, I realized, okay, I've sort of leveled up enough as an author in general that I think I want to start tackling novels again. And so that was in the middle of, releasing comic books and doing all that kind of stuff. And once I finished writing all the other stuff that wasn't just Chosen, I decided to actually take a dip back into writing novels. And so that's how we got to the release that came out last October, which was somewhere around 2.5 years in the making, but would have come out way sooner if we hadn't run into the end of the 5-year plan. And the 5-year plan was always to build a platform to then write a novel to then get traditionally published, because people were already reading me. And I sometimes, not every year, go to the only real writing conference that we have here in Las Vegas, which is hosted by the Henderson Writers Group, which is really great. And it's really great because outside of just workshops that help you get better as an author, you actually get to schedule pitch sessions with the faculty that they bring in. And the majority of the faculty are literary agents. So after the first year, the second year I went there, the first year I went, I pitched this novel to these agents, right? I pitched it to like 4 people. And 2 of them requested the manuscript, which is amazing. So I give these 2 people the manuscript. One of them is like, you know what? I read this. It's nice. I see you online. You're doing okay. I don't know what I can do for you. I'm sorry. And I was like, okay, cool. The second guy read it. He's like, you know what? This is nice. I dug it. It's not really for me. Here's some notes. So I took like 9 months to incorporate all of these notes he gave me, because he read like the whole thing and he gave me crazy notes. It was a lot. So the book got better, right? I went back the next year, and in between that year and the next year, my online presence and the total number of sales and downloads, it like tripled. It was crazy. It was a crazy year in between. We went from like 25,000 total downloads to well over 60,000. It was nuts.
Wow.
And it was because I had also been putting out more stuff, right? So I don't know, you get that feedback loop where like one person finds episode 1, then they want to read everything kind of thing. And so the second year that I came back, I had this little like folder, like little binder that I took with me. And it was like a little, it was like, I was doing like a real pitch, like, hey, I'm Will, this is Chosen. And I would flip the page and I'd say, here's my total downloads across all my stuff. And I'd flip the page and I'd say, here's all the total reviews across all my stuff. And you can see that people who leave one review, they usually leave another review kind of thing. And then I'd flip and I'd say, let's talk about my new book. And I'm not even joking. I went from 1 year, 4 agents, 2 of them request a manuscript, to the next year, 4 agents again. And every single one of them said the same thing to me. They said, you're doing really well. Why would you want to work with a publisher?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Looking back on it now, that's like an amazing thing to hear. But I'm not even joking. I had spent legitimately 5 years working towards these conversations.
Right. And they're just like, well, keep doing what you're doing. Yeah.
It's like you are a AAA baseball player who also makes YouTube videos, and you're like, hey, you should bring me to the major leagues. And they're like, oh, but you're doing so good on YouTube. Like, why don't you just keep catching fly balls on YouTube? And you're like, the dream was to play major league baseball. Like the dream forever was to be traditionally published. And it was like so hard to convey that to these people who are legitimately like, no, dude, you don't want to work with a publisher. You're doing great. So, and it's crazy too, because I'd be like, but I want to be, I want to be in grocery stores. And they're like, So
Yeah.
print books and go sell them to grocery stores. I'm like, I want to be in libraries and work with real editors. And they're like, you can call a real editor on the phone. Like, it doesn't matter. So that was like, that really took the wind out of my sails.
Right.
And I spent probably 5 months where I just didn't do anything. And my wife, who was just my girlfriend at the time, you know, she put a lot of she put a lot of energy into really, you know, like pumping me back up kind of thing and being like, hey, this doesn't have to be a bad thing. Like, they're telling you it's a good thing. And so we did a little bit of inside counseling, and you know, I had to get the passion back a little bit. And so that's really what happened there. I don't know why we got on that tangent.
That's okay.
I talked too long.
That's okay. Matt has a question. Matt D. He says, when you sit down to write, do you decide, hey, I'm going to write a comic and fit the story to meet the format, or do you write a story and let the story decide the format?
So I don't like when other people give this answer, but I'm going to do it here. And the answer I'm going to give you is the characters sort of decide for me when it comes to what we're doing. The reason I say that is because in giving readers Easter eggs to find and in telling meta stories on top of the stories that we're telling, anytime I want to tell another aspect of whatever larger thing we're talking about, you know, like one of the main superheroes is a spy for the genetic extremists. No one's figured it out. All the clues are there. It's whatever. But if I sit down and I say, okay, the next one really has to give people a very in your face, hey, this is this guy and he's a spy, right? Then I would think about the way that I wanted to do that. And at the end of the day, if whatever I came up with I thought was going to work better as a comic, then yeah, that's what we would do. When I kind of touched on this earlier on the podcast, but when I decided I was going to give Chris a comic, it was because I knew I wanted to really dive into her as a character, because she was like so fun and she was not a main character yet in anything. But I knew, okay, if I'm going to dive into a main character whose thing is magical tattoos, it had to be a visual format, because, and this is kind of fun, in all the prose that she's in up until this point, anytime that she uses a tattoo, I never describe what the tattoo is. And I did it on purpose, because I knew that she was probably always going to get a comic. And I honestly didn't want to lock myself into any single design until we were going to draw it and it was going to look cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I didn't want to say like, oh yeah, she's got like a flame tattoo on her wrist or something like that. I just didn't want to do that. Dogs are barking again. Sorry.
It's okay.
I had a question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Amazon is an interesting place to me, and the Kindle thing, because yeah, fans on there, from what I understand, I don't know, but are crazy, and they're like insatiable, and they're always want more, like more and more and more. Do you find that they pushes you to do more and to do more in the same universe, rather than like branching out and doing your own thing or working on, you know, something else that you would rather that the people they're wanting so much makes you focus on that more?
That's a really, really great question. It's super insightful. So here's the thing. I don't write to market.
Okay.
And that's a term that anyone listening might not be familiar with, but essentially, you know, the right to market concept, you can see it most commonly with young adult books. And so when you get any one of these new young adult books that is hot on the scene, they follow this very formulaic, you know, she is an empty shell of a person who you can insert yourself into, and she's going to fall in love with whatever kind of character, and they're going to do stuff and whatever, right? Doesn't matter. They're formulaic. And so this concept of writing to market exists across all genres, basically. I've never done it because I don't really know how to do it and also have a good time. Mm-hmm. And so I just end up telling these stories that I want to tell, that I think are cool, which is advice I got from Neil Gaiman, not personally, but that he says. Mm-hmm. And so what happens is this. Throughout the entirety of the Chosen Universe's tenure, you get 10 people who download episode 1 or any of the other works. And out of those 10, you get maybe 4 that like it. The great thing is the 4 that like it, who, you know, they see what I'm going for and they enjoy it for whatever it is. Generally, they want to read everything. Generally, if someone likes it, they're like, I need more, which is exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Which is really great. But I think this is my hypothesis here. I think because I don't write to market and I'm in a small niche and I catch an even smaller portion of the niche's readership,
Mm-hmm.
I don't really run into the kind of broad, sort of insatiable readers that you would run into if you were to write in, again, like young adult and write to market young adult books.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a positive and a negative. It's a negative because, I mean, my readership is comparatively very small to someone who can, churn out 70,000 word books, every couple weeks, right? But it's a positive because I feel like I get more thoughtful people who are into the series. Not to say that other authors don't, but I just don't run into like that pressure that other people feel when they're trying to make writing and self-publishing their only job,
Mm-hmm.
which is like really, really hot the last couple of years. I get to take my time. No one complains about it. I have a solid readership. When something new comes out, they definitely want to read it. I can't really ask for more than that. It's just a passion project at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And, so I hope that answers the question you were asking.
Yeah.
I don't really catch that pressure at all. And it's because I don't write to market. Like I catch such a small portion of this massive, online presence that I don't think the kinds of people who would even think to put that pressure on somebody or like leave those kinds of reviews, I don't even think that they're interested in what I'm doing because I don't know, they're just not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Man, yeah, I feel like, was there anything we didn't talk about that you definitely want to talk about in basically I'm wrapping up like the interview section, which has been great, by the way. It's been great. You had a lot of interesting things and a lot of cool insight into how you go about the process.
Thank you.
Oh,
maybe a speed round question type of thing, or like a list question. Because I know you pointed out the Popeye spinach can. There's like a Spider-Man reference, kind of a loose Spider-Man reference. You mentioned Neil Gaiman. Like, give us a list of some of your maybe some of your favorite pop culture things.
Oh, can we do like Easter eggs instead? Just Easter eggs?
Okay. Even better. Yeah, let's go there.
Okay. All right. There's a lot of them. There's a couple that I really, really enjoy personally that I think don't resonate with people, probably because they don't realize it's an Easter egg in the first place, but also because to other people it's just not that funny. So, okay, here's a really good one. And this is something that occurs in the Megatech novella and also in the Grizz comics, okay? It is a gun that can shoot anything. And I know it's easy to say, oh, well, all guns can shoot anything. No. The projectiles that come out of this gun can be anything. Like you pull the trigger and the gun somehow shoots whatever you need.
mm-hmm.
Completely overpowered. Only shows up like ridiculously rarely. And when I introduced it in the Megatech novella, I like needed a Deus Ex Machina kind of thing.
Oh man, that's great.
Awesome.
And
it was like really weird that I did that because she as a fully real man, these dogs are going nuts again. She as a fully realized character is the Deus Ex Machina. She is that. But because I was doing her origin story, I put her in this fight scene, you guys, and I was like, oh my God, she can't make it. like
this is her origin story and she's going to die.
Yeah, I'm like, she wouldn't get out of this. And so what I did, and this actually is a pop culture reference in its own way. What I did was she has like a supervillain apprenticeship that she's in. That's her story. And this guy has a bunch of weapons on his wall. And she kind of just takes the one that, like, for whatever reason, she thinks is cool. And it was like a throwback to the cricket gun from Men in Black.
Yeah.
Where it's like not a big gun. But then she pulls the trigger and just like crazy stuff comes out of it. And so it became like a meta Easter egg in the comics, because in the Grizz comics, they go and they explore this thing that happens all the time in the Chosen universe in different works, which is like this underground Chosen blood sport that gets broadcast on private television. And so the main character and his team are infiltrating this blood sport, and there's like a bazaar like leading into the arena for the competitors, where like vendors are there selling their wares kind of thing. And there's this guy, and he like shows this gun, and he's like, hey, you want to buy this gun? Like it can shoot anything. And the character he says it to is a tinkerer, like he makes stuff. And so he's like, no, man, I got all my guns, I'm good. But but then you as the reader, if you had read Megatech and you saw that, you'd be like, oh bro, you should have got that gun.
It's like Aladdin's lamp in the form of a gun.
So that's my favorite little Easter egg. There's a lot of them that surround the guy who is a spy. And the favorite one of mine for that is it's in Jane, right? Had to think. And it's in Jane. Yeah, it's in Jane, I'm pretty sure. She walks into a nightclub, and there's a bunch of people on the dance floor, and none of them have faces, and they're all like different colors, and they just look like one like shifting. They look like one shifting like sea of bodies kind of thing, and they're just like it's like a rave turned up to 11 where everyone is the glow stick, right? And that is that character who is in other stuff, and he's the only character whose gene and the power that it gives him makes sense to be able to do that, right? And so it's like the most offbeat, random application of his specific power, and it's just like, if you don't really pay attention to him as a character and what he can do, you're never going to put that together. And as the author, it makes me so happy that I did that. I'm just like, man, no one is ever going to get this. It's like so
but
weird.
I do, and that's awesome.
It's like, and so that's what I'm saying. Like, that's only good for me. Like,
well, that kind of goes to what you're saying about you don't write to market, you write what you want to write and what you think is cool. Yeah.
I can't even talk about it without like laughing. It's just like it's just so out there. Yeah. So,
what do you have? I know you just came out with this comic last week. What do you have coming up?
Yeah.
Anything exciting coming up for you?
It's a really good question. Yes. And I really appreciate you asking it, because I needed to talk about this. So 3 things. The first one we already talked about, new kids book. It's coming out. I don't know, maybe like September. I'm not sure. It's ready to go. And what I'd like to do is probably write half the next one before that one comes out, which is not going to be a problem. The second thing I'm working on is the second full-length novel. Second full-length novel, just to give everyone a preview, follows a main character whose story picks up, and this is the first time we're going real sequential here. Like, you'll want to read the novels in order. It picks up literally in the last scene of the first novel, and it follows a character who uses that scene to escape from his indentured servitude. And he is someone who, previous to that specific scene happening and his book starting, was a performer in the Midnight Circus.
Yeah. Spoiling, guys, if you follow.
Yeah, which is
sorry.
Okay. Yeah, the Midnight Circus is a thing that exists in the Chosen universe. It's super evil. Everyone is basically an indentured servant who is a performer or works for the circus in almost any way. And I like that concept so much that we're also doing, and I say we very specifically this time because this is a project that is heavily involving my wife. I'm also going to make the jump to Webtoon. And what we're going to do, what we're going to do is sort of like our own version of Tales from the Crypt, where we do Tales from the Midnight Circus. And so what you'll get are not little, but maybe like 4 or 5 episode, like I don't even know, like how many panels are an episode, like 25 or something. So it's like 125 panel stories of different characters from the Midnight Circus specifically, where we get someone like a crypt keeper who is really like the right-hand man, not the ringmaster specifically, but he's like the right-hand man of the ringmaster who brings us into each story, is sort of kind of the primary narrator kind of thing, and is also going to get to tell his own meta story across like this first season. So what we have now for that is basically the first character's storyline. It's going to follow this pair of bird people. They're the high flyers in the circus. And Yeah. So writing for Webtoon, for some reason, is way harder than writing regular comics. And my wife is a Webtoon like fanatic. She reads so much stuff, and when it comes to having like your finger on the pulse of an entire platform, she is that person. So she's like the primary editor on this Webtoon draft that we're working on, and I mean, like, all her notes are really good, but this is like the longest I've ever spent having to edit a script before we even go to having someone draw test panels. So it's going to be a minute. We probably won't even get, people giving us test panels until the new year. And so it's a project that I'm anticipating, as long as we don't get hit with like some crazy bill. It's a project I'm anticipating gets off the ground in 2021 at some point. But when it does, the plan is to have enough stuff in the can, because weekly releases are so important on Webtoon. We're going to have enough stuff in the can that we've got maybe like 5 weeks of content. And then beyond that, we'll be able to kind of get a regular release schedule, at least for like the first season or whatever, and then be able to go from there. So those 3 things are really what the primary focus is right now.
Without diving too far into it, because I don't know how long we should pull the conversation out for, but I'm very interested. What aspect of writing the Webtoon do you find more difficult? Is it the pacing? Because it's definitely a different kind of structure and pacing. You have, I'm guessing, less space to work with, and the breaks are in different spots. Is that kind of it?
That's really, honestly, that's the heart of it.
Right, yeah.
It's the format, and the format locks you into telling the story in the way the format can tell the story.
Right.
Webtoon to Webtoon, the format's not exactly the same. For the longer form stuff where you're reading it top to bottom, it's not all exactly the same. Like, we all know that. It's, each Webtoon is basically one giant splash page, right? You can think of it like that. Even if you have separate panels, the panels routinely bleed into each other. So here's what happens is, you've got to write it to the format, and then someone like my wife has to read it and say, well, you know what? This doesn't work because just because of like the way that people who read successful Webtoons like are going to receive it. We're not writing this to market, but we are going to make sure that it has the ability to be successful from all of the major sort of brushstrokes to making a Webtoon in the first place. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And you're
feel authentic for the people who use it.
Right. Exactly. Right. Exactly. Like we're not skimping on anything. There's not going to be anybody who's like, oh, I hate the lettering in this. You know what I mean? We're like, and that's just like the equivalent to like the normal style of comics. All of that stuff as it translates into Webtoon, we're hitting all of that. And yeah, I'm really excited about it. It's going to be super fun. Like, once we really get the ball rolling, and especially as I kind of adapt to writing for the format, that'll help us be able to make stuff more quickly. And so I'm stoked. Like, Webtoon is so hot right now. We probably should have jumped on it a long time ago, but we didn't. And I just think that there's like a total untapped aspect of the reader sort of marketplace that I think can really help people gravitate towards Chosen as a brand.
Mm.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So, again, real quick, where can people, if they want to find your work, where are the best places to do so?
So if you want to just read stuff right now, go to Amazon. You can type in my name. You can type in literally just the letters CH05EN, and my stuff's going to come up. If you want to find me as a person, you can go to... sorry, I was reading Matthew Downs' comment. Yeah, There we go. If you want to connect with me in any meaningful way, which is totally possible, you can hit me up on Facebook. My Facebook is super easy to find. You can find me on Instagram. It's at CH05EN_Will, which is, I think, what I made my name on the show. So people would be able to do that more easily.
Oh, right. Yeah. You know what? I should, hold on. Let me turn those on somehow.
Yeah, I can see it on my screen. I don't know. So, so those are really the 3 places that you can find me super easily, super fast. The door is always open. I will tell you that. This is something that I, as a reader, like to do and have always really done since I was like a teenager is, you find the contact info of an author whose work you really enjoy, and you send them an email. I've done it forever. I've exchanged emails with anybody that I really, really like. Christopher Golden, Anne Rice. I mean, like, literally anybody whose books I really enjoy for any reason, I've written them an email. And the cool thing about authors is a lot of the time they get back to you. So I've been fortunate enough that when someone gets a hold of my email, if they feel like writing me an email, like this has happened. I've had kids send me emails about stuff. And so that's something that like I always look forward to and is, just like such a treat because I'm not huge when it happens. But I mean, like, honestly, anybody that comes across anything that's any way to contact me, like if you want to have a conversation about literally anything, I will talk with you. So.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Do you regret CHO5EN at all in terms of a title?
Okay. I feel like you're asking because I feel like the question really is, do you regret?
Okay.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I should. Okay. I did phrase it weird. The title, it's a good title. Do you regret it from a searchability or marketing standpoint?
From a searchability standpoint, no. It was incredibly easy from the very beginning to lock down that keyword on literally every search engine that you can imagine. That was always the intention, was to find a way to get a brand that was going to be findable in the first place. So here's what happened though, was it's easy to misspell. Okay,
right.
Not everyone realizes it's a zero. It is easy to run into the 7 thing. You know, the meme about that movie 7 where it's like 7.
Mm-hmm.
So from the very beginning, I've gotten, oh, what's Cho 5in? And it's like, it's not that. That's
yeah.
You live on the internet. Come on. Leet speak is a thing.
Exactly. Like, do I feel like I shouldn't have given it a leet speak title? No, I don't. And it's only because it's so easy to find me and there's no one else doing it. There's like one other guy who used to come up on the search results and he was some random Twitter handle who like played Madden and he doesn't come up anymore. His Twitter handle is like not active. So I don't regret it only because it's so easy to find. I've gotten used to whatever kind of silly comments you get. It's kind of neat that it ended up being leet speak, but honestly, it also does tie back into what we're doing from a foundational aspect of the universe itself. It's the CH05EN gene.
Yeah,
that's what
which is good. Which is good. Yeah. That's good. I like that.
And so what that follows,
rhythm to it.
It follows real world gene nomenclature. Like real world genes are 2 letters, 2 numbers, 2 letters. There's no gene that is CH05EN. Like that doesn't exist. But there's like HE04XY, like that's a gene or whatever, like there's stuff that isn't words that are genes. And so I just took like the nomenclature and I made a word. That's what I did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good. It's one of those things where like doing as much like on like dealing with like branding and online, websites and just online anything and try, and podcasting. I also run our podcast network and just knowing like trying to tell people like you go here or search for this or this is what this is. Anytime I see something like that, I just like I get a little shudder where I'm like, I would hate to have to try to like explain it every time. But
on the show named after an obscure comic convention.
On Grawlix podcast, nobody knows what a Grawlix is or how it would be spelled. Like, so right. Like it's one of those things where that was my first thought. I was like, oh God. Like I shuddered, just like, nope, wouldn't want to have to do it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Not an insult on the title, and I do,
sure. I do
definitely appreciate the gene naming scheme is that's pretty good.
I've been really lucky that I was intentional in that regard, and so it's very easy to just kind of explain that to somebody, and then they go, "Oh, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense." Like it's very easy to get that reaction, so I really kind of just don't ever worry about it. But it's not been without its literal hardships that are exactly what you're describing, pretty much.
Yeah. No, everybody's probably like, "What are you guys even talking about? Shut up." Yeah. But that is the type of thing. That's the type of thing like that. Yeah, I definitely get fixated on that stuff. Well, I think, and you guys can disagree with me if you want. There were a couple interesting news stories, but I think we should just wrap the episode.
I think this is a solid episode. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, William, for joining us. It's been super interesting.
Thank you.
I always like having guests, and it's always interesting to find out people's processes and things. You know what I mean? I always enjoy it.
And you were very patient while I neglected my emails. I'm notorious about that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's no
There's
problem.
probably like 2. I mean, they're not following us. If they were, though, there's at least 2 other people like, how'd he get on? They've been neglecting my email for 3 months.
I mean, you have to follow up with people. That's just the world that we live in.
Persistence pays.
You have to follow up. I'm not even like offended. You know what I mean? I just like,
Awesome.
you set a little reminder. I put you on a sticky note. I look at the date that I sent it to you. It's been 10 days. I'm like, hey, what's going on? You know?
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. Oh, I'm trying to improve. I'm trying to get better on that.
I believe in you. Yeah, you can do it.
That gives me strength. All right. Yeah, this has been great. Anybody else have anything? Anybody else have anything coming up? Jesse, you got anything coming up you need to tell people about?
I mean, sort of a soft pitch, I suppose. I just created a pile of stuff that's gonna fall. I wrote this book like maybe 5 years ago. I finally, because this coronavirus thing hit, and I need to give myself, something to do. I'm almost done with the follow-up book 5 years later. But I'm kind of excited about it because these were all things that I did, quite a while ago, and this will be my opportunity to kind of publish the rest of it. So anything that was unpublished, I'm getting it out there, and I don't know when it'll be done because I want to take my time, make sure I do it right, cross all the T's and dot all the I's, but eventually that'll be coming up. And I put up the Tank Monkey book. For the audio listener that has no idea what I just did. My original book, No Monkey Business, was about my webcomic for Tank Monkey, who is literally just a tank driving monkey. And this first volume basically collected all of the stories that would have been literally stories, because he was originally just like a comic strip character. He wasn't even supposed to be a comic strip. He was just a doodle that kind of grew into his own character. And so the new book will be all those things, and they're super one-off and super quirky things. The title of the book will be Ratopotamus Unleashed, and Ratopotamus is just one of those bizarre one-off characters that basically gets 1 or 2 strips, and then we move on to Squirrel Yeti and every other bizarre thing that enters my brain.
How does Ratopotamus? He only ever got 1 or 2 strips?
He only got two technically, yeah. And actually, the second one isn't even really his. It's Party Spider.
That's a character. Somehow that is a character that went on and had a life of his own, because he's one of your characters that's burned in my memory.
Yeah, he's basically a rainbow surfing hippopotamus that is summoned the same way that Beetlejuice is summoned. You just say "rad" too many times, and there he is. Shows up like the Kool-Aid Man. It's crazy.
Melanie?
No, nothing.
Were you gonna say something? Okay, well, I was just gonna say I have no books to sell. I have no books.
I don't yet either, but someday.
Well, I will have a compilation album for the Electronic Musicians Group, which is a defunct group, but we've put together a compilation album. It's just waiting on me to release it. I'll have that, but that's not ready yet. So
nothing's ready yet. It'll all be ready soon.
Melanie,
is
there anything we should be amazed about?
There's always something you should be amazed about.
His throat, or his acid reflux magnet. What is it called?
That's pretty cool. There's also they discovered a new particle in the Large Hadron Collider this past week.
What's it doing? What is it?
It is, let's see, it's a subatomic particle. It is as of yet unnamed. But it's a quark, a charmed quark, and it's brand new, and they are like, this thing's crazy, and it does all kinds of weird stuff. We don't know. So look it up and you'll find it.
Okay. All right. William's like, what is going on? This is how we end the show. We just
Yeah, I like it. I was just gonna say I saw a meme recently that was like time travel is real and that's why 2020 is going so terrible. Like people keep going back in time to try and fix whatever the
Yes.
crazy problem was, and so that's why we're getting all this other stuff. And that's why murder hornets disappeared or whatever. I don't know. Discovering a new particle really makes me think that might be dead on.
it's a butterfly effect that won't
Yeah.
quit.
I like that. I hadn't seen that meme actually.
Yeah.
I kept seeing the one that the fact that nobody's popping back to warn us about all this stuff proves that time travel isn't real, which is like the opposite of that meme, but I like that meme better.
Yeah.
All right. That reminds me, Melanie finished this Netflix series Dark last night, and she had to call me and tell me all about every depressing detail.
It was so depressing.
It's time travel and very timey-wimey.
Oh.
And it made me cry. Oh.
All right, well, let's go ahead and end this show. So everybody, thanks for watching. Everybody on Facebook and Twitch later, and William, just so you know, later we'll have a replay of this up on our YouTube channel as well. And then Monday, hey, wow, we actually a Twitch comment. What's going on? We are ending the show, but thanks for tuning in. How you doing? The rare Twitch comment. And then Monday, this will be out as a audio podcast. So for all the future podcast listeners, thanks for listening. And thanks again, William, for joining us. It's been awesome.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Bye.